Jai Guru. Well, it's a pleasure to be back in Delhi. Today I have an interesting subject. I had a little fun with the title. Do Yogis Cry? So if you think about this, crying is a pretty natural function. The babies seem to know how to do it right away. But I think that many people, when they get on the yogic path and we talk about withdrawing inside and being impersonal, they feel that any expression of emotion is not appropriate. So I thought we would talk about this subject today. And the first issue is, well, do yogis cry? Who's a yogi? What is a yogi? And the word yogi means different things to different people. If you were a scientist, you might be a scientist who worked in his garage, or you might be a scientist who was the head of, space exploration. There could be a wide range of how really into science you were. You could be a student, a beginner, or you could be very advanced. And it's the same with yogis. A yogi is a person who practices yoga. But what is yoga? Well, that means many different things to different people. Some people, I saw this one, a YouTube video. I didn't see the whole thing. I just thought the title was great. Wine and cheese yoga. So people just sort of make stuff up. Yoga means union. Union with what? Union with Satchidananda, infinite consciousness. Ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. Okay? So the average yogi is not consciously one with infinite bliss. But they're still yogi. So the thing is that a yogi, up until you achieve freedom in spirit, you are trying to be a yogi. Well, let's look at both. Let's look at the people who are trying to be a yogi and the people who are free yogis. They're siddhas. They're supremely free, no karma left. They're one with infinite spirit. So, well, we know that the people who are not free, they cry. I mean, whether they should or not, probably will be part of the discussion. But they do it. And now, do free souls cry? What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, we got a yes. Any no's? Any no's? No one's going to say no? Okay. Well, we know that Yoganandaji cried. Yeah, there's several stories, but the one that comes to mind is when Sister Gyanamata passed. So here, Sister Gyanamata, he said, was completely free. When she passed, he said he saw her go into the watchful state. In other words, to spirit beyond the creation. And yet he cried when she left. Well, why do people cry at all? It's an expression of emotion. What is emotion? An expression of feelings. But once we use the word feeling, we have to learn that from a yogic point of view, the word feeling has two different meanings. It has feelings that are associated with the ego and the personality, which has likes and dislikes, preferences, opinions. In response to those opinions, the ones that, the feelings connected to the things that you like, you smile, you laugh. But the feelings that you have that are connected to things that you don't like, you become upset, you may cry. Now, a master, by definition, is unattached to what we would describe as those human feelings, and lives in feeling, but it's a different kind of feeling. It's a feeling associated with identification with infinite spirit. And if we go back to the 8 attributes of spirit, 2 of them are peace, calmness. Oh, well, let's go on. Love, joy, sound, om, delight, wisdom, power. So these are the attributes of spirit. So infinite peace, infinite well-being. So when your feelings are rooted, and we also describe spirit as impersonal. Sometimes, recently in this winter season, I know in America they've had a lot of big storms this year. And when you see the headlines of a big storm, you say, the wrath of the storm. You know, you say, well, our storms, are really that angry? You know, are they really like upset with people? Well, it's interesting. Yoganandaji said that storms are created by the negative thoughts and the negative karma of mankind on a large scale. It's a kind of mass karma. So there is sort of a negativity that can be associated with it. But Master also said that all circumstances are neutral, which means that storm, sunny weather, it's all the same. It's all a question of what we do with it. So if we look at life and say, well, how am I responding to my life experience? I would say, well, how do I feel about it? When we live in feelings associated with the ego, then those feelings limit us. They don't allow us to be rooted in the ocean of spirit. The ocean of spirit is never wrathful. God is never wrathful. But God will allow us to go through our karma according to what the momentum of energy that we've created. So we have within us samskars, karmas. And all of those karmas that are lodged in the astral body, in the inner spine, represent what we describe as likes and dislikes. And those likes and dislikes produce within us, or we express them as, I like this, I don't like that. So I smile at this, I'm upset with that. Master said that anger came from thwarted desires. When we don't get what we want, we become angry. And one of the ways that we express anger is to shout, to yell. It could be to cry too. It's a very passion. And this is passion is a word that yogis don't like to. We don't. You see, we want to be interested in what we do, but we don't want to be emotionally attached to what we do. We say, well, God is the doer. God is acting through this form. I really can't claim success or failure if God is doing it. But we are the gatekeeper of whether that which flows through us will represent ego consciousness and emotions, or whether it will represent infinite spirit and wisdom, and love and joy. And so when we come onto the spiritual path, we're pretty much expressing ego consciousness and our likes and dislikes. And so if a loved one dies, then we cry with what we would describe as human tears. And if you think about babies don't need to be taught this. They automatically know that crying is associated with things that you don't like, and smiling and laughing is associated with things that you do like. This is a mechanism that most people think is the whole reality. So they would say, well, I don't want to become a robot. I don't want to have no feelings. Well, this is what we need to understand, is that as long as we live in the ego feelings, we are limited to the expressions that most people have, which means that their feelings are up when they like it and down when they don't. And they're only as big as their emotional response. Through the practice of meditation, we break our sense of identification with the ego consciousness, and we identify more and more with infinite spirit, which is calm, which is even-minded and cheerful in all circumstances. So we don't over-respond. That doesn't mean we don't have feelings. You can have compassion for someone when they suffer, but you don't have to jump in and suffer with them. And this is what happens, is that we become swept up in both our own emotional response to life, but also the emotional responses that other people have. So, and then we might feel pressure. Well, everyone else is crying, I better cry too, whether we feel it or not. So the thing about the emotions is that we can use them for our spiritual development. And what we want to do, and this is really the process that you go through when we practice bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion. What we want to do is awaken an energy flow. And of course, Spirit has infinite love, and the heart center being the center of the creation for us, for each of us. Master said that the center of the of life, of spirit, is a point of intuitive perception in our own heart. For each of us, because spirit is center everywhere, circumference nowhere. There's only center. There is no peripheral. It's all center. So for us, because we're living in individualized consciousness, we think our center is here. It's really everywhere. But given that we have to work with who we are today, we experience love in the heart. And Bhakti Yoga is the awakening of the heart's natural love and directing it to the point between the eyebrows, back at its source. And so what we want to do is awaken energy. Now, in the beginning, we have to use the tools that we have, our human emotions. So when we chant or when we pray, we become emotionally involved. Master said it's completely natural. He said, cry for God, yell for God, roll down on the floor and do whatever you want to do for God to awaken the energy and to begin to commit yourself to this inner direction of energy. But what we don't want to do is leave it at that. We don't want to be like a fireworks. You blow off a lot of light and then it's over, it's done with. You have to keep it flowing. You have to. So when we chant, what we do is we begin by being energetic and a little outward. And because we don't have anything else to do, we become emotional. So many devotees, when they start, they will cry, and because they're sincere, this is the mechanism that they know how to use. So we use the emotions to awaken the energy, but most people, when they take the path of emotionalism, seek to have an emotional catharsis. This was the purpose of the Greek tragedies. They'd tell these terrible stories where horrible things happened, and they'd take a long time to do it, and it would build up, and it would build up, and you become emotionally involved, until finally it would resolve itself, and even though it was terrible, because it resolved itself, you felt better. But that's a little bit like going to have a massage, but they do it so hard that it hurts, and then afterwards you're just glad it's over. So that is really not the way we want to do it. What we want to do is, and this takes practice, and it has to go in harmony, side by side with our meditation practice, because the process of spiritual perception is that stilling of the mind. We have to make the mind calm. And then as we do that, we become more and more aware of energy flow inside. And then we can direct that energy flow as we become deeper and deeper inwardly connected. We want to experience spirit. Spirit is underneath our emotional consciousness. So we have to quiet the emotions. So in the beginning, we create energy flow with the emotions. We begin chanting, we do it loud, and we do it with the emotional heartfelt. But what we have to practice while we chant is the same principle as when we meditate. We have to interiorize it. We have to take it deeper and deeper inside of ourselves to a state of stillness. And this is a very big difference between the way most people do kirtan and the way Master taught it. Most people, they just whip things up, and the end is when they have the biggest whipping up. And as soon as they have this big, huge finale, like the end of the fireworks show, and then, boom, it's over. And just like we always describe Hatha Yoga, the yoga postures, as preparation for meditation, chanting should always be preparation for meditation. It should take us from our everyday worldly, active, conscious, restless mind, and it should gather up all that energy and then bring it into the heart and create, make it into a loving presence, and then calm it down and inwardly direct it up to the spiritual eye. So the goal of chanting is not really devotion, because devotion is an active energy flow towards spirit. What we want to get to is prem, that experience of the universal love. And that universal love can only be experienced impersonally. It's fascinating that the way that we can feel most personally connected to spirit is by getting rid of the ego, the personality, and merging into an ocean of impersonal love. Because that love is the core consciousness of God. And if we have agitation in the mind, we can't experience it. So when we practice devotion, what we're doing is awakening energy through the heart, focusing it at the spiritual eye, and then taking it into deeper and deeper stillness. So many times we chant loudly at the beginning, and then softer and softer and softer. That's the same thing that we do with the affirmations. When we do the affirmations, we start loud, and then as we repeat them, we get softer, and then we get whisper, and then silent. This is the same thing we want to do with chanting. So go deeper and deeper into from conscious, then let it permeate the subconscious, and then lift it up completely into superconscious. That superconscious state is completely still inside, even though you may have some motion on the outside. And this would be a description of a master crying. Would be one with spirit, but would be expressing through that personality in a very human way, and yet it would be rooted in stillness, in sweetness. We're not supposed to say that the world is a bad place. We're not supposed to deny the flavors, the spices, the emotions of life. But we need to root them in spirit, or we will suffer. This is really the key, is as long as we live in the human emotional up and down, we suffer. We suffer both in terms of being happy and sad, but we suffer most importantly, which people don't realize, by limiting our awareness. It's like living in a closet and thinking that that's your whole world. You don't realize you're missing so much. So we're suffering, sometimes we don't even realize we're suffering. We're missing so much because we don't allow ourselves to expand out, because we tie ourselves to these smaller points of view. Now, the day that we become yogis, the day that we begin practicing yoga, is not the day that we're going to give up our emotional response to life. So one of the key things that we have to understand is that we have to honestly take ourselves from where we are today. Don't try to act like something that you're not. So we see this is it's for some people it's very hard to resist. So they come onto the path, and suddenly they go from being very natural to being very, and you know, it's not real. And it's well intentioned, and it's not a completely bad practice because you're practicing being the way that you want to be. But at the same time, and let me go back on myself and say this: in a certain way, you should do that. One of the challenges in the spiritual life is that period of time where you come into the spiritual life, but you're still your old approach. And you have to, no matter what age you come into the spiritual life at, you have to go through a period of spiritual training, a spiritual transformation. You go from being just the human consciousness that you were before to being consciously a yogi at whatever level you're at. And in that process, you actually change the way that you relate to life. And until you've made some change, you're not really the yogi. You're still the person that came to yoga, that wants to improve. Now, you're going to want to improve until you become free. But my point is that let me use the example of a soldier. When you get into the army, you go to boot camp. Now, when you get to boot camp, it doesn't matter, you know, even if you played soldier on the weekends, you're not a soldier. And if you've never thought about being a soldier before, you're completely a novice. And you go through a very intensive period of training, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is. And then you come in, you're a civilian. You come out, you're a soldier. And you look like a soldier. You walk like a soldier. You talk like a soldier. You act like a soldier. You've never been in war, but you're suddenly, you're not an experienced soldier. You're not an admiral or a captain or whatever, but you are a soldier. You have to shift. And this is necessary for all devotees. And one of the ways this shift happens is when we really truly begin to feel inwardly connected. When we've experienced some peace in meditation. And then we begin to connect our emotional response to life to that inward stillness. And we say you're centered. You live in your center. You live in your inner self. And when we make that shift, then we're practicing yoga. I mean, yoga allows for, as soon as you think about yoga, you can be a yogi. Yogis don't care about labels. But the point I'm trying to make is that this essential shift in the way that we approach our life from living from the outside in, living from the inside out. This is really the big shift. And then, of course, the beginning of the experience, not just the belief that it could be possible, but the experience of our connection to infinite spirit. And as soon as you have, everybody feels this at some point. You feel touched. When you go into a still place, it's not, yes, it's a calm mind. You can go into meditation and just have a calm mind, but at some point, you will feel touched by something more than just a peaceful mind. And that is the beginning of your real relationship with infinite spirit. And one of the powerful ways that we do this is by feeling everything in life, take it in the spine and up. And that, by living in our center, we begin to root ourselves in spirit feelings, soul feelings, instead of emotional personality feelings. So, do yogis cry? Yes, it's a very natural thing. It's interesting. I observed this in Korean Energy when I first came to Ananda in 1972. And Korean Energy had lived in the ashram in Los Angeles up until 1962. And then he was kicked out, and he had to readjust, and it took him some years. And then, but by 1968, he started Ananda, and he was still at that time very much the ashram yogi. You know what I mean? He was in the spine, and just even-minded and cheerful. Good, good. But crying wouldn't have been on his list of things to do. But over the years, it was fascinating to watch how he became more and more absorbed in actually being that inward connection, instead of sort of living a foot in both boats. In other words, we initially were in the boat of emotional consciousness. And someday we'll put one toe into the other boat, which is spirit consciousness. And gradually our weight will shift over time from emotional consciousness to spirit consciousness. And eventually, most of your weight will be in spirit boat, and then just a little touch of the personality. The personality will then be a beautiful expression of that spirit consciousness. And this is what I observed in Korean Energy, that as he got older, I was in his presence when he cried in 1977. So it was very unusual. I was shocked. I was like, and he was, I won't go into why he was crying, but he was deeply disturbed by something, and he cried, and I was like, oh my goodness, what to do? And then I was with another person, and so there we were sort of consoling Swamiji. And it was just like, wait a minute, this is wrong. We are not qualified. But of course, you're always qualified to care about a friend. And so yes, he cried. What some people say, oh, he cried, he's not a great yogi. But no. As I watched him over the years, and he even said to me, he wrote, if you have read The Path, the original The Path, and The New Path, you'll see that they're really two separate books. And the main difference is that, and Kriyanandaji said this in my presence, he said, well, when I wrote the first book, I thought I was supposed to present things in a certain way. But over the years, I realized more about how to be and how to present things. So in other words, he grew. And this growth included the ability to be completely relaxed with who he was. And that spirit was so established in his consciousness that he could allow his personality to be relaxed and less conscious about trying to control itself. In the beginning, you really have to discipline yourself. But eventually, you can relax and just be the divine expression that God gives you to be. And in that, I remember, I'm going to guess it was, well, this was the next time that I saw him cry, was here in Delhi. a very dear friend had passed, and he was asked to speak at the funeral service. And he got up to speak. I'm guessing that this was 2007. I think it was approximately 2007. And he got up to speak, and he looked at the group, and then as soon as he started to talk, he just became overwhelmed with his appreciation for the soul that he was going to talk about. She had been a very strong supporter when he first came to India, and so he had known her since I believe it was about 1958. And so, you know, she'd known her over a long period of time. And, I mean, this was shocking, beautiful, amazing, all in one. And he was shocked. He was surprised. He had to sit down, he couldn't speak. And he said, that's never happened before. We all were very surprised. And yet, it was beautiful. We have preconceptions about what life should or shouldn't look like. But when we root our consciousness in spirit, then it doesn't, then the way we manifest it becomes a natural expression of the personality that we are in its very highest form. And, you know, the masters lived through personalities, but they lived through them in the best way. And this is what we're trying to do. We're not trying to squish our personalities. We're trying to root the controlling force of what comes through that personality in spirit. And by doing that, then we will find the greatest balance, the balance of being rooted in spirit and then expressing that oneness of spirit in the most natural way according to the role that God has given you. I mean, Sri Teshwar was stern. Master could be stern, but he was more known for his joy and his love. And if we were to look at the lives of all the saints, we'd see that they all have unique expressions, and they live them rooted in spirit, and then express them according to God's will through that life. This is what we want to do. So, do yogis cry? Yes, but let us begin to cry as an expression of infinite spirit rather than emotional reactionism. We don't want to live controlled by the ups and downs in life. We want to live even-minded and cheerful. This is the life of the yogi.